Okay. This is our third and obviously final before Pesach. And those of you who want to follow along in the text, I've texted it to the Chassidus at K group. And we're going to be starting on the page, it's numbered 26. You have a narrow version because we're starting in the left-hand column where there is a vertical arrow, an arrow pointing down with a little arrowhead. At the end of this sentence is the word ma'od, and then there's abbreviation kuf mem klaf. So anyone who doesn't have the place, let me know, but let me just give a little introduction. We've all either just come or are going to B'dikas Chometz. And we've talked about the difference between Chometz and Matzah. Both of them are breads that a person lives by. And we explained last week that there's a interesting reason, though a lot of people haven't thought about it, which is why it is that bread, grain, can enliven a human being, even though in the hierarchy of things, the speaker, the midaber, the human is on top, then next below is the animal, the next is the grain. So the phenomenon is the lower is actually giving life to the higher. And in brief, we explained that this is a phenomenon that recurs in the entire cosmos, that which is rooted highest falls lowest. As an aside, that's one of the reasons that Hashem wants a dwelling place, a dwelling place for himself in the lowest world specifically, mamish, because that's where his essence is most dwelling, most apparent, most expressible, because the highest falls to the lowest. And the highest is the world of Tohu, the world that preceded us, and therefore the sparks fall low. And as a result, those sparks is of course a metaphor for enlivening energies, have the power to enliven us. And that's true of any physical food. But in matzah, there's a special quality, which is not only that it enlivens us physically, but it enlivens us spiritually. And what we're going to explore tonight in some depth is the inyan of Achilas Matzah. But starting from the fact that we begin this whole process with Bir Chometz. We have to destroy the Chometz. And tonight's topic is becoming Pesachdik. In other words, how do we become Pesachdik? We can make our house Pesachdik, which itself is no easy matter. But how do we make ourselves Pesachdik? So how do we understand Chometz metaphorically? Chometz is arrogance. Chometz is gaiva, from which is and in which is rooted the perception that we have that we know a lot and that we can eventually master everything. Masters of the world, right? That we will be able with our native human intelligence to discover and reveal all the mysteries that have been eluding us for thousands of years. That's the ultimate arrogance. Because the Torah teaches us that the path to discovering and revealing everything that's been hidden from us for all these years is just the opposite of arrogance. It's bittul, it's openness, it's egolessness. And we are meriting this year and every Pesach to be able to actually ingest this quality of egolessness, the opposite of arrogance, both in the physical bread that we eat, matzah, and in the spiritual dimension which it contains. So we'll start now. And again, please post questions or comments as we go. Similarly, when we have the mitzvah in front of us, as we will tomorrow night, of the mitzvah of matzah, which is called in the Zohar, it's called the bread of faith. Now, faith is just a tag word we'll use, but what does it mean? Faith is that level of consciousness which is above and deeper than rational thinking. We've talked about this before, but we'll let the Alter Rebbe express it for us. Amuna is two words. recognition and knowledge. And again, knowledge, I mentioned this a number of times, but just to repeat, because it's important, the way that we know the meaning of any word in Hebrew, that is, as it applies to the Torah, we're not speaking about Ivrit, but Torah vocabulary, is its first occurrence and how it's used in the Torah. So the Torah uses the word das to describe the intimate relationship between Adam and Chava. Adam yoded Chava, he knew Chava. So das is not just an intellectual faculty, a head quality. It's an intimate absorption and union of the brain and the heart. So emunah is a hakora behadas. It's a recognition, as if you see it with your eyes, and a knowledge, a tie of the heart to the brain to the heart. Behiskashvus, and that's the third word. And there's a knot that's made here. These are three words. Try to engrave them in a certain way in your brain, because das is, there's a mitzvah, da es elokei avicha, know God. It doesn't say understand God. It doesn't say explore God. In fact, it says, if you explore God, if you explore God, you'll never find him, because he's not found that way. And our core essence of being a part of God is not found that way, through intellectual pursuit. It's found through hakora, seeing with your mind's and soul's eye, the hadas, an intimate union of head and brain, and tying that together, and having the experience of those three things unifying us b'HaKadosh Baruch Hu with the Holy One. B'chol Yisrael ma'aminim, and every Jewish people has this emunah, has the capability of discovering, and that relates to our topic tonight. To become Pesachdik means to discover the bittul, the essential bittul, the essential recognition, the essential tie that we have to God. And the manner of doing that is through nullification of the ego, getting rid of the arrogance, opening oneself up. Every one of us has that quality, because Kol Yisrael Ma'aminim, every one of us have faith, believe, that he alone is, just as he was before the world was created, conceive, as it's written, Ani Havaya Lo Shenisi, the Torah says so, nothing has changed. All the change is at the superficial level. And underneath, everything is the same, empowering, being empowered moment by moment by pure godliness. The Hamshachas, we're skipping these little words, this infusion of this perspective, das elyon, comes from the level which we call das elyon, which is ki ein sof baruch hu, which is the infinite one himself. And he himself is lamayla min hachma, higher than the highest levels of our brain. And therefore, since he's higher than the highest levels of our brain, we can't grasp him with the levels of our brain. We can only grasp him with emunah, the beginning emunah. And as we said at the outset, matzah is called in the Zohar, michlu de hamanuta. This is the bread that nourishes our emunah. In other words, we're going for a cure tomorrow night. We're going to be cured of the superficial way that we've been accustomed to look at things, and develop and nourished the quality of seeing godliness, which is in charge and underneath everything. And that's why matzah is called the bread of faith. Because bread itself, we said, was from this level of das elyon, which is the world of toihu, the world that is closest to essence itself. When we spoke about earlier last week about a child doesn't know how to call his father and mother, doesn't have a klora, recognition of his father and mother, until he tastes the taste of grain. And he needs to taste grain, he needs to taste bread. That's in order to understand, that develops seichel. That is, these are developmental stages, as I said last week. And the second stage of development is out of the womb. There's development in the womb, and then there's out of the womb nursing, and then the third stage is moichen dekatnus, the brains of small brains, which is this brain that comes from being separated from nursing and eating something separate, which is grain. And that develops levels of maturity, we'll call it, levels of maturity, developmental stages of maturity in the mind of a human. And that's just with physical bread. It's a gashmis. Amen b'lechem de matzah, but in the lechem, the bread of matzah b'Pesach, nimshik min slabish achoyev min b'chinas eretz el yoina. There is invested a power from the highest spiritual levels, which we call eretz el yoina, the supernal earth. Shemimenu yaitze lechem, from which bread comes forth, amamshik b'chinas zu be'elakus, and it draws down to us, to our souls, this recognition, this awareness of godliness. That we can call not only our physical Father, but our Father in heaven. And we're going to get this in a very strong way, ad mitzi hanefesh, until our souls pour out of our body. I mean, think about this. It's just, I mean, it sounds very, wow, you know. But put it about this way: if a person were to really be able to put aside and flatten himself like a matzah, so that all the ego is out of the way, and all the arrogance of thinking that what I know and what I can control, and even the arrogance of thinking that every day that I open my eyes, I'm in control of things, when in fact, each one of us says, Moida ani lefonecha, we admit, Moida, we don't understand, but we admit, that you, God, have put my soul back into me. You, God, have given me a purpose for life in this day and in this moment. One can reach a state of awareness of that. Say Moida ani with meaning. And eat the matzah with understanding of that which is being invested in you that's beyond understanding. Ad mitzu hanefesh. And this can come, and it's not a function, as we said earlier, of intellect, understanding. On the contrary, it's a function of bitul. And with this, you have the ability to nullify your will in face of His will. And one becomes in a state of low shifless nafshi ka'ofra l'chol, that one comes in a state of shifless, which is expressed by the soul, by this expression, my soul becomes like dust to everyone, And this is a power. This is not being a shlamazel. This is a power. The power of bittul. The power to open oneself up and see and live with the experience of Hashem levadoi, of God being in charge of and creating and bringing everything into being all the time, which creates, of course, a very different attitude toward life in general. Why are these Hagim called Hagim with Simcha? Because that's the degree to which one is full of arrogance, or to the degree that one has any arrogance, leads to blockages, because you see things this way and it's this way. In the height of arrogance, it's my way or the highway. It's not a happy way to be, because you're not able to let in a richness of experience, or even let in other people sometimes, because you're so confounded by your own self. The way to joy, the way to happiness, the way to exaltation is to let go. To let go of the you and find the he, the allness, the oneness. And that's expressed by nafshika ofer l'koltia, not being trampled upon and being like a shlomazel, but being totally open so that experience is that much more enriched. This is the power that the supernal earth has, the supernal source of nourishment has, that comes down level after level after level until it's enclosed in the matzah that we'll eat tomorrow night. Ois Dalet. I made up a little bracket there. Now we said, this matzah, there are two phases. Remember, the matzah before Chatzos, the matzah after Chatzos. Before we left Egypt, on the 10th of Egypt, we were commanded to take the sheep of Egypt and slaughter it, and to eat it with matzah. And this matzah needed guarding. And then there's the matzah after. And what happened during the course of that last day? We offered that. We went into our homes, as we are all in our homes this year, and a very big plague affected the whole land of Egypt. And as a result of that, an aftermath of that, we went out of Egypt, And when we went out of Egypt after midnight, the matzah that we had no ability to rise at all because it had been stricken by this emanation and revelation of the Orient Sof. So, but the matzah before midnight, Tzricha Shimar, needs guard. That you have to guard the matzahs. Now, what does guarding the matzah mean? It means from the external forces. Now, what are the external forces? The Alter Rebbe here is right away jumping to something personal, something psychological, and something spiritual. The outside forces are the forces which have a tendency to make us think about ourselves as primary. Again, the yesh. The yesh, the degree to which we are something and rise, is called in the language of Chassidus chitzonius, or klippas, the shells. So we have to be careful from that. We have to be careful. And this is ordinary life. We have to be very careful of it. On Pesach, we're going to get an infusion of an ability to rise above that. But meanwhile, well, it's still Erev Pesach. And you just saw what we did tonight, or will be doing later. We have to mevatel the chometz, beer chometz. Get rid of the external vision that we have. Pierce through the shell. We have to make sure that we ourselves do not become chometzdik. As we expressed in David HaMelech, chometz means sour. Chometz means has a sense of impure as well. We have to make sure that we don't become chometz. This is what I mean in the title of the course, becoming, in the class tonight, becoming Pesachdik. We have to first work on ourselves, shimur. We have to guard ourselves, be careful with ourselves, to make sure that we're not coming to bechinas chimutz. Shehu hagasis behisnasis, and these are the words that we use. These are arrogance and self-importance. I mean, I'm defining these a little bit figuratively. Agasis is raising oneself up, and hisnasis is also elevation. But functionally, operationally, in a person, this is arrogance and self-importance. That's chimutz. So that level of being careful is called yirat Torah, watching ourselves, staying away from things which are going to be, which the Torah tells us, God tells us, are bad for ourselves. By the way, just as a side thing, but totally appropriate, the most important thing, since Brad, I heard this in the Shir I was listening to, I don't remember who said, we have a commandment in the Torah to lishma nafshesechem, to guard your souls, and it says very, very much. And it doesn't say about the other things that you shouldn't do very, very much. The reason it says guard your souls very, very much, because the primary, most important, the ikar, the root of everything is life. And so the watchword today on the street, in the world today, is isolate, guard yourself, shimur, hold yourself back, stay away from any iota of anything that could possibly interfere with life. That's called yirat Torah. The lower level of fear, which will translate fear of the result of doing things that God has just told you, don't do. Stay away from it. And when the Rabbanim and the Das Torah says don't do it, that's the Torah that's being given us today. Guard ourselves. That's called yirat Torah. V'skashis hamuna bilvad lamata min hatam b'das. And that's called amuna, which is below reason. You just have to do it. If you know something's dangerous, you just stay away. No one has to tell you and figure it out. You know, when you're walking toward a 10-foot pit and you see the pit, you stay away. Because you don't need the highfalutin reason for that. An animal knows to stay away from a pit. Alkein tzricha shimur. So therefore, that's something you have to be careful about. Alkein nichra matzah chosevod. And that's the matzah that we eat, that was commanded. If you look in the Torah, that matzah, before chatzos, it was spelled matzos without a vav. Because it was still at a small level. Gam matzah chosevod hu miloshin matzusa. Matzusa means motza umeriva, controversy, argument. Kedisa b'zoyer chela gimel daf resh nun aleph. Shehameriva hu liyes bitul hayesh vegasus. The argument that you have to have is an argument with yourself. La'olam yargiz yetzer tov al yetzer hora, the Chazal tell us. A person always has to argue with using his yetzer tov over his yetzer hora. So matzah, that's the matzah before Chatzos. There's an argument. Bir chumetz, that's tonight. We have to consciously destroy the chumetz, because if we don't, the old habit of thought can get the best of us. Which is not the case with the second matzah, which is after Chatzos specifically. It's after the Korban Pesach, and it's after the revelation of the King of Kings in Mitzrayim. After he reigned the plague, he then redeemed us. It says Hashem skipped over. Shehu inyan dilug, which is a jump, a skip. Which indicates that the revelation there was a revelation not in an orderly way, not in what we call Seder Histalshalos, which is a chain of cause and effect, but it was a jump. It was something, back to our theme of above, something that is experienced at the level of Amunah, way above Seichel. Like a Seder Histalshalos, because of the Moed Gadol, as we'll say in the Haggadah tomorrow night, with great awe. It was a truly awesome experience. There Gilui Shechina, because that was the time when there was a revelation of God's presence. Which is a revelation of godliness much higher than worlds. Which that was revealed in our souls then. And that's what the Chassidus says. This is the time when there was revealed in front of us Melech, Malchei, Hamlochim. I was going to explain, we have king and kings of kings. So we have a singular and we have two plurals. King, kings of kings. I'm going to explain this. Because kings of kings are two plurals, right? 2 plus 2 is 4. Malchei Hamlochim, kings of kings. You have 4 levels of Malchus. And this refers to the levels of Malchus, Shemer Ba'abar Oilamis, that are revealed in the 4 worlds. No accident. Yud Kei Vav Kei has 4 letters. There are 4 worlds. Kings of kings, 2 plus 2 is 4. So these are the revelations in the Seder HaHistalshalos of the 4 worlds from Atzilus, Bria, Asira, and Asiya. Umelech, the singular, over them, Melech Malchei Hamlochim, who bechinas Malchus the Ein Sof, is called the king as he is the infinite one. You see, the king, in order to make worlds, has to, in a certain respect, make himself somewhat finite, because worlds, by definition, are measured, have shear. World has time, measure in time, and measure in place. God himself proceeds meaning not in time, because that's doesn't work. There's no time before time. What does it mean God precedes these levels? He's deeper than that. He's deeper than that. He is his Malchus the Ein Sof, which is explained in other Sforim, in Chassidus Sforim, the awareness that God has to want to be king before he actually becomes and implements his kingdom. That's called Malchus the Ein Sof. And that's the level, another way of saying what is happening on Pesach. The Dila, it's a jump. It's not Atzilus, Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya, 4 levels, kings of kings, Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's higher than Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Shem of Haya. It's called Malchus of Ein Sof. Shalamayla Malam Istalshus Dal Oilimis was much higher than the 4 worlds of Abia, of Atzilus, etc. As I said, this is a lesson of Zohar. This is in the beginning, when it rose up in the will of the king to reign. This is Haniskir B'Zohar. This is mentioned in the Zohar, Parshas Bereshis, Dates Vav, Kolchag, and also it's written Kain Kosa B'Sefer Eshel Avron. In that sefer also it's written Shalidei B'Chinas Agili Zud Dafke Gvadoilam. And it was this level, Malchus of Ein Sof, that's revealed on Pesach. Skipping now to the next page, the first bracket. page Yudalad. Okay, now this is all very nice, and I hope you're at least, I hope you're getting it as it is on the page and I'm saying it, but also that part of you is thinking about the topic tonight, which is becoming Pesachdik. If this is what's happening on Pesach, it's meant for us to absorb. I mean, it's always says about Jews, every simcha is with eating, but this one, we are actually eating faith. We are eating, we are being nourished to have an ability to see things from the perspective that we've been talking about on these pages. You know, I was thinking, I mean, this is just a very side thing and a personal thing, but when we go to the Seder usually, Baruch Hashem Kinahar, there's a nice family, big family. Takes, maybe 45 minutes to get around the table with even just the Manish Tanis. And it's delightful, and there is no question. And there's no question that the isolation that's being imposed upon us, you know, guard your souls very much, Shemer, the watching and guarding we have to do, has a painful aspect to it. But at the same time, we all have much more time to introspect, much more time to think about what's going on. Even as I know some people will do the Seder very fast and spend the night learning about these things. Or do the Seder very slowly because there's no one telling you, hey, rush. Well, maybe your husband or your wife or your nephew or whoever, few people happen to be around, but it's certainly not going to be the kind of structure and the kind of need to run a crowd and work a room the way that it often is. So there's some positive that's designed to come out, because everything is by Hashem's design. And one of the positive designs of the negative experience that we're all going through, and Hashem should help that none of us should be going through any of the severe negative illness that's around, and anyone who needs refuah should have a refuah shlema. By the way, I just mentioned that because I want to call out especially Rabbi Yehuda Dukes. I don't know if you know him, it doesn't matter, but I'd like you to please engage for a moment with a little bit of mindfulness for Rabbi Yehuda Dukes. Rabbi Yehuda Dukes started JNet, and JNet is an internet-based network that hooks up people who want to learn Torah with people who can teach Torah, and it's one of the things that I got involved in over 10 years ago. I have one single Chavarusa in JNet, and he needs refuah shlema. But I think at this moment, at least, it's a good moment for everybody to have in mind the people whom you know who need a refuah shlema, and know that this, whatever this pain is, it also has a flip side. And one of the flip sides is what we can learn about the new normal. The new normal that comes from having the experience and the opportunity to be alone with ourselves a bit more, not be rushing through the world, to be alone with our spouses, with our significant others, with our friends, with the close ones in our family. And that's an opportunity. Aval b'chinas habitul d'matzah. This is this page Yud Daled at my bracket. This level of matzah, this revelation of the matzah that we're eating on Pesach, she'achar chatzos, contrasted with the matzah before chatzos, which we have to be mevarer the chumetz tonight. Tomorrow night, it's all gone. The chumetz is gone. The arrogance is gone. The gasus is gone. The self-importance is gone. For the sake of being open to flows from above. And this is in the matzah of tomorrow night that we'll eat. Aval b'chinas hamatzah zu she'achar chatzos, which comes after chatzos, hu b'chinas bittul amiti. It's not the just shiftless and yiras chet or yirat haTorah, the lower level of fear. It's a true bittul, and it's called yira Allah, the higher level of bittul, the higher level of fear or awe. Hainu b'chinas hagili or ein sof. Excuse me, skip the line. Shenimshach b'chinas gili ma'shelamayla mehadas. It comes from a level that's higher than understanding, das hamusuk, higher than a level of graspable understanding. Shahoya oz benafshim, and that's what's radiating into our souls tomorrow night. Where is this light coming from? It's coming from a revelation which is higher than, say, the Histalshalis, higher than the four worlds, the chain of descent. Because that's what rained upon, rain is an R-A-I-N, rained upon the Jews and upon us when we were redeemed from Egypt. This doesn't need guarding. This doesn't need watching, because this is being zapped from the Or Ein Sof in a way that it's impossible for gasus, for arrogance to be there. The chimutz, the chumitz is impossible to be there. The chumitz which is yeshus, full of oneself, the hagasus and arrogance. Why is that? Why is it that it's not capable? Why, if we were really sitting at the Seder, absorbing what the Seder has to offer us, why would we be in this state? Because because the negative forces, they have no way to get a hold of this. The negative forces are all about yeshus, gasus, arrogance. And I keep saying those words, but they manifest themselves in many folks in ways that maybe they don't even give these titles, arrogance and gasus. Just thinking that, as I said earlier, that we can master everything, that we're in control of everything. We humans, the highest in the hierarchy of created beings, right? We weren't created to be masters of the universe. We were created, as it says in Bereshis, la'avda or l'shamra, to serve and work the garden and to keep it. We were created to be agents of knowledge to the world that there is a God. There is a God who brings this reality into being all the time, and is at the same time given a law for all of humans. And when we do that mission and we help to wake up the world to that, that's what we're here to do. Not to master the world, but let God master us. Let God master us. And that's the opportunity that we have on Pesach. Ki yira Elahu, in this little bracket, Ki yira Elahu, this high level of fear, what I would call awe, being overcome with the Or Ein Sof. Hu Or Abba shedoicher chavitzonius. This is called the light of the Father, which pushes away all the externalities. And it's only the lower level where you need to be careful. This is a quote from the Haggadah. So there, it says there was no opportunity in the dough pans of our fathers to become chumitz because of the revelation of the King of Kings of Kings. This goes on the second kind of matzah, the matzah that we're eating at the Pesach Seder. It doesn't have any capability to rise at all because of the strong revelation. The Bechinis Melech Malchei Malchim, of the King of Kings, who was revealed to them, where there's no possibility for the external forces to grab a hold. Where the external forces are called arrogance, self-importance, and chometz. This is what it said there. They baked it in the dough pans, ugois matzahs, cakes of matzahs, kilei chometz, because it couldn't become chometz. It couldn't come to become chometz. And why was that? Because, and this becomes very interesting, all of the mindset of Mitzrayim, the way of looking at reality that we call Egypt from Lashon Metzorim. Again, the theme is the looking at the world as the superficial through the superficiality that it presents, and through the lens of only reason, is called limitations, boundaries. It's called Egypt. Mitzrayim Lashon Meitzar, Gevul, limitation. But when we go out of that state of consciousness, when we become Pesachdik ourselves, then she'ein shemechiza klal l'Mitzrayim. Then that worldview, that way, that habit of thinking, doesn't have any relevance anymore. At the level where we're revealed, where the Ein Sof is revealed. And if so, if it has no relevance, automatically there's no arrogance. There's no self-importance. There's no, I'm the master of the universe. Again, there's, God is the master of me. I'm not the master of it. Even though when we went out of Egypt, and we came to Ramses, it was quite a ways, right? And Hashem shortened the ways, He shrunk the way for us. And there was still time for the matzah to bake. So it's not an insufficiency in time, the way the Maxwell House Haggadah will tell us there was no time. On the contrary, there was plenty of time for the matzah to rise. There was even more time than the time necessary for the matzah to rise. So why didn't it? For the reason we said above. And therefore, you'll see that the matzahs that we say in the Chumash now, when you look at the Chumash after we revealed, after the revelation, after the redemption, you'll see that the matzah is written with avav, a big drawing down that's epitomized, that's objectified in the picture of the letter vav, a drawing down. This is a drawing down of a level of godliness which comes from moira gadol, awesome, great awesomeness, which we called earlier in the Haggadah calls Gilui HaShekhinah. And this is the higher level of fear or awe. As we say in davening, and we say, we add Vav V'Hanera. The Vav meaning Hamshach. Hagadol Hagibor, which we say before, Hagadol Hagibor, Hagadol V'Hagibor, and then V'Hanera. The Naira, the awesomeness, is an awesomeness that comes from the Hamshacha, the drawing down of the letter Vav from the Or Ein Sof itself. The lower level is a different level. It's the matzah that doesn't have a vav. It needs guarding from the chitzonium. But the second, Ein Tzorech Shimur, doesn't need a guarding. Okay, we're going to do one more ois, because the next piece is on Shvi Shel Pesach, which Emir Tzashem will do Chol HaMoed, which is interesting. Chol HaMoed, normally I would say for those who are around and are not visiting zoos and all other wonderful places, but the way it looks, we may all be around and have an opportunity to get together again Chol HaMoed on before Shvi Shel Pesach next Tuesday. At least at the moment, that's what I'm planning. And Shvi Shel Pesach we'll hear then next week before Shvi Shel Pesach. But for our last piece on tomorrow night, we now need to understand, we can understand the answer to the question that we posed at the earlier part of the minor. How do we say, now you know that there's a din to finish the Seder before Chatzos. And we've just talked a lot about, hey, yeah, but that was before we went out of Egypt, and now we've gone out of Egypt. So what's the story here? There's a matzah before Chatzos, but we're eating it. How does that apply then, the matzah after Chatzos, while we're still eating it before Chatzos? So that was a question we asked. How is it, as we said, how do we say, this matzah that we're eating before Chatzos, tomorrow night, Lila, at night, that it didn't have capability to rise. Okay, this is Bechinis Hamedregas Hamatzah Habez. We said it's the second level, not the first. Which happened only after the revelation, which was Achar Chatzos. So how do we address this question? Everybody give me a signal if you don't understand the question. I'm not getting any signal. Okay? So we're going to eat before Chatzos, and we're going to talk about the matzah after Chatzos. And that's what we're eating, the matzah after Chatzos, as we just learned the whole previous time. This that the matzah before Chatzos needed a shimur, to be guarded. That was when we were in the time of Galus in Mitzrayim. And we didn't yet have Matan Torah and the giving of Torah and mitzvahs. Therefore, we couldn't get access to, we couldn't have access to, we didn't yet have access to that great, awesome fear. And the level of bittul before Chatzos. After Chatzos in Egypt is another story. We had the revelation, right? But before Chatzos, we didn't have Torah, we didn't have mitzvahs. So what's implicit here, and where he's going to go with this, is that the Torah and mitzvahs that we have, and the immersion that we can do in Torah and mitzvahs, gives us an access to the Or Ein Sof, which is the infinite light, which is higher than reason all the time. But the novelty, the chiddush of it, the first occurrence of it, so to speak, is Achar Chatzos, when we went out of Egypt, and we have that with us now, 3,000 odd years later, before Chatzos. And according to Chatzos, but back in Egypt, they had only the matzah without the vav, the lower level, where we had to work on batul ritzonecha, nullifying our will in the face of his will. And it was through working on ourselves that we were able to receive the revelation after Chatzos. And we then had we were blessed with the appearance of the revelation of God as an Ein Sof, not just in the natural order. But now that we've received the Torah and mitzvahs b'Har Sinai, so we, all year long, before Pesach, we draw down drawings down of godliness through our Torah and mitzvahs. Therefore, even in the matzah, this matzah that we eat, we are able, and also through the Torah and mitzvahs that we've been doing all year long, we are able, we can receive the revelation of the Shekhinah, from that high level, king, higher than the four worlds of kings. We can receive that. It's written in the Zohar, Parshas V'Yetzei Hanal, Matzah kadmita ula basora mitzvah. This is interesting. Matzah is originally matzah, but it's also now connected with the word mitzvah. Matzos, we've been discussing all along the two different ways of spelling matzos. Mem tzadik tov without a vav, or mem tzadik vav. Matzos with a vav, and matzos is lashon mitzvah. Mitzvah with a vav. B'teisvus vav. We have Torah and mitzvahs. If you go to the matzah bakery and bake matzah, every 18 minutes they call out l'shem matzos mitzvah, for the sake of the matzahs which are a mitzvah, with a vav, because we have the Torah and the mitzvahs which have commanded us to eat matzah. Nimsa, so it comes out mitzvah. Matzah, the mitzvah, which is at the level of matzah, habez, the second matzah, shehu matzos melevov, which is matzos with a vav. There's mitzvahs, right? Look at the page. Mitzvahs and matzos. So they're interchangeable. We have mitzvahs, so with a vav, mitzvahs, so we get matzah with a vav as a result of Har Sinai and the thousands of years that we've been preparing ourselves as a Klal Yisroel, preparing ourselves in the world for the revelation of Pesach, which is ultimately, of course, the revelation of Mashiach. It says, the Chazal tell us, Benissen Yigoyel, that in Nissen we were redeemed, and Benissen Yigoyel, and in Nissen we will be redeemed. And tomorrow night is the redemption. Period. Because through our fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs, that draws down the 620 pillars of light of Keser Elyon, of the supernal Keser. I'm smiling because I've said this a number of times. I mean, right after Purim, when this horrible pandemic broke, we remarked that it's called Corona. Corona is crown. Crown is the highest level that exists in holiness, and it's the most deep and dark level of the Chitzonim, of the Sitra Achar. So you see, we have tomorrow night Keser, a crown to fight the crown. And this is not play on words. This is the word. Keser Elyon, the supernal Keser, the holy Keser. I mentioned in the Chassidus tonight, when I told you about the class, I quoted a Gemara in Eruvin. The Gemara in Eruvin says that learning Torah brings health to the world, life and health to the world. One of the reasons I keep doing this class, regardless of how many are there or not, is because of that fact. That because we have some people together learning Torah, and listen, there are thousands of other internet Torah things, and I'm hoping that all of you are connecting with as many of them as possible, but with the knowledge that learning Torah brings health and healing to the world. A person is called a small world. It brings health and healing to each and individual. A community is a larger world. And the world at large are the four worlds of Atzilus to Biyah. So when we draw down from above Atzilus by learning Torah, we are bringing health, healing to all of the worlds. Because it's coming from the supernal crown, Keser Elyon. And that's another language of saying what was revealed, the King of Kings, the supernal crown. They're all penetrating energies which heal, which give life. Torah is Chayim, Torah is called life, and Torah brings refuah. Therefore, that which was drawn to the original forebearers in Egypt in the middle of the night, which was the time of the pinnacle cut between before and when after the king was revealed. So that's nimshach lanu b'matzah zu. That's drawn to us through this matzah shona oitlim kodem chatzos that we eat before chatzos. Because we have Torah mitzvahs. Shehein hein atzmis rotzon ha'elyon, which is the essence of God's will. And this is what we're going to say tomorrow night. This matzah that we eat, why do we eat it? And Pirish, the Bish, I understand when we were in Mitzrayim. Shohei Bichinas, top of the page, left column, Shohei Bichinas, Golus, HaKlippus, and we were sunk in the exile of the shells, the superficiality of reality, the worldview of magic and science, masters of the world. Oh, I understand that when we were in Galus Klippus, this Sitra Achar Ma'od of the shells, and the other side, which was very stark, very, very strong, and we didn't have Torah and mitzvahs. So Nisava B'chilas Matzah D'Chodem Chatzos, we were commanded to eat matzah before Chatzos, Shehu B'chinas Matzah Chotz Avov, which was the matzah without Avov, Kedei Lias Lehem Zu L'Hachona. So this should be a preparation. We had to prepare ourselves. Shimur, guard yourselves. To receive what was going to come later. A big preparation. However, not like us. Where we have already been given the Torah and mitzvahs. Mitzvahs and mitzvahs are mitzvahs of the king. And when we do Hashem's mitzvah, what are we doing? We're mevatling ourselves. We're making ourselves chosser. We're making ourselves without a yesh. And in order to do what the king wants us to do, we're taking upon ourselves the yoke of heaven. And the first level of taking upon oneself the yoke of heaven is called yirat Torah or yiras chet or yiras einish, fear of sin or fear of punishment, meaning I'm going to do these things because I know that if I don't do these things, the Torah has told me over and over again, not so nice things are going to happen. If you want chayas, true chayas, good life and good health, do my mitzvahs. So I get it. Okay, that's called yirat Torah. B'Sefer Shalbenim in the Tanya, Perek Mem Aleph in Perek Mem Aleph, which we will be starting in the next day or two. By the way, just a little, I've told you in this Chassidus at K WhatsApp that since I've been home, my Seder includes learning Tanya every day at 7:30. That's where I do part of my chitas. And I have made a WhatsApp called Daily Tanya. If any of you want to be in that WhatsApp, and we do a little Zoom meeting, and we learn Daily Tanya together. So we'll be coming across Perek Mem Aleph, I'm not sure if it's tomorrow or very soon. So, as is written in another place. Al Posek v'yadaber elakim b'midrash b'drush Chag HaShavuos. In the Maimorim of Chag HaShavuos, this is talked about. So what are we eating before Chatzos? We're eating the matzah after Chatzos, before Chatzos. It's after Matan Torah. And that's why the Haggadah can say matzah zu that we're eating, even though it's before Chatzos. This matzah is the matzah that doesn't have the capability to rise, because it's after Matan Torah. And after we have had thousands of years collectively, in our collective consciousness as Jews, of giving ourselves over to the Ratzon HaElyon. There's matzah that we're eating, even though we're eating before Chatzos. We're not getting just the first level of matzah. We're getting we're all getting the second as well. The awesome fear, the awesome experience, where the dough had no capability to rise. Excuse me. This is the revelation of the King of Kings, who redeemed us. Which is a revelation of the infinite, may he be the infinite one, may he be blessed. Which is much higher than the order of the four worlds. This matzah, this revelation is coming to us through the matzah that we're going to eat tomorrow night, for the reasons we said above. So that's interesting. How do you get hinted both matzahs in one matzah? Because we're eating it before Chatzos, and we're getting the revelation after Chatzos. It's known the difference between chometz and matzah, hurak be'ois hey, is only the letter hey. Here's an interesting point he's going to end this piece with. Interesting thing, right? Matzah, mem tzadik hey, chometz, mem tzadik, but with a ches. Now, one thing that's brought in other Chassidus, which he's not going to say here, that I'll say it, what's the difference between a ches and a hey? Very little. It's a little opening. At the top left, the hey is open. Bittul. Chometz is closed, full of itself. But he explains differently. I mean, not differently, another pirush. In a hey mili shalom, the letter hey, if you were to spell out the letter hey, it's spelled hey, yud, hey. Hey. So the filling up, meaning extension of the letter hey when you spell it out, is with two hays. It's also a letter hey. And by the way, this is explained. This is a kafela. It's a letter whose spelling out is doubled, and kafela is the machpela, the cave in which the doubled pairs are buried. Adam and Chava, Avram and Sarah, v'chulu v'chulu. The double pairs. That's why it's called the Machpelah, the doubled one. V'lochein, Nikras HaMachpelah, therefore it's called the doubled one. It's written in another place. That's Maimer in Bereshis and Parshas Chai Sarah, the first Maimer in Likutei Torah in Parshas Chai Sarah. And these two hays are hinted at in the word matzah, which the spelling out of the hay is with two hays. So the two hays, is an interesting sort of Kabbalistic way of looking at it, but he's answering the question, how is it that this one matzah can have two levels? The level before Chatzos, because we're eating it before Chatzos, and the level after Chatzos, because we're eating it after Matan Torah. Well, that's because the hay itself has two levels. The single hay, which is the way it's revealed before Chatzos, and the letter hay as it's spelled out, which you don't see, which is the more hidden dimension of the letter hay. Ki hamilui, when you spell out a letter, like hey, yud, hey, the filling it out with that second hey is revealing something which is hidden. Which, by the way, sort of encapsulates the whole of Yiddishkeit. To reveal what's hidden. To reveal that there is a God who brings into being and runs the world according to a plan. And he's made that plan known to us and told us that if we want ourselves, our communities, our cities, our countries, our worlds, and all the worlds to be healthy, give sum tosim olechem aleim melech. Take this king upon yourself. That's the hidden message that's revealed in the Torah. And that's the milieu of the hay. That's not the way the world has seen things to date. We're all hopeful that given the lessons that we're all learning from this pandemic, that the world will become closer and maybe the balance will tip, and God willing, we will come to the state of consciousness. I mean, so many people are just, with a small aside, I have to wrap up myself in 3 minutes. A small aside, many people have noted, if you listen to what people are talking about the Torah on the internet, it's a global phenomenon. The whole world is involved in one thing. Well, what other thing on the side of holiness is one? Hashem Echad. The one thing. And another point, there are many points I could say here, but time is running out. And I also have to complete my preparations for tomorrow night. The other thing I want to say is that global cooperation. You notice the impeachment is long lost. We're not talking about it. The election up and coming, you don't hear too much about it. What you hear is one voice, all focused on one thing. Molech kol ha'oretz deus havaya. The world could be full with the one thing, which is the knowledge of God. And that's why this moment is so pregnant with hope for a redemption that really will be the redemption, the final redemption, the redemption with Mashiach Tzidkenu. That what is normally concealed is going to be revealed. Bevichinas helam hamuster, the concealed and covered over, v'nelam toich he atzmacha, and that which is hidden in the letter He itself. The He itself, the letter He, is pregnant with another He. And the other He is the revelation underneath the surface that's ready to bubble up and break through. And this concealed He within the other He, Malchus, Keser. It comes from Corona. It comes from the crown. Because, as we started the class, the end is wedged in the beginning. The highest of high falls to the lowest of low. A mashal I've said before, and it's brought in Chassidus, if you shake a fruit tree at its root, at its trunk, the highest fruits fall farthest away from the trunk. The higher the origin, the lower the fall. The higher the light, the more infinite the source, so the more darkness it falls into. The end, the beginning is wedged in the end. Vayim Shkosim says, Vatigadol, see over there, Koyach Adonai, this Koyach hu inyan Gilia Helen. The power that's underneath the surface of all, and that hopefully with the help of God, and I mean, admittedly, the pain is unbearable. That we are going through, watching and feeling and being near to loved ones and friends. But at the same time, there's something going on here that should be teaching us something. That God, number one, runs the world. And for whatever reason we can't fathom, we don't try to fathom why the righteous suffer. We don't try to fathom that. But we do try not to fathom, but to experience that there is a concealed force which is responsible for everything that goes on, is in charge of everything that goes on, and has charged us with the responsibility and mission to discover Him, to live Him, to teach Him, and to bring the world to the awareness of Hashem Echad. And hopefully our Sidorim tomorrow night will help us release the fountain of Emunah which is necessary to become Pesachdik Jews, Jews who are no longer arrogant, no longer stuck in the normative realities that we come from, and are able to live the abnormal realities associated with the Infinite One Himself. All right, God bless. Everyone should have a kosher and freilich and Pesach. Until we meet again.